The atmosphere was lethal. The helmet came off anyway. Every alien sensor went blind. This was not a metaphor, not a test drill, not one of the simulation scenarios the observation deck staff ran for calibration. The outside air could strip molecular cohesion from most carbon-based life in seconds, if the acidic nitrogen blend didn't asphyxiate first. No species had walked those plains unsealed in living memory, and not for lack of trying. The gases had a peculiar talent for corroding ambition. From the main window of the deck, a reinforced pane half the size of a cargo hauler, one could watch the winds shear across the copper dust, dunes, feel the low-frequency hum of atmosphere compressors, and see the sharp, alert gleam of the sensor pylons embedded in the rock. This was science's edge. Beyond this outpost, there were no colonies, no trails, no assumptions, just calibrated data and the chill of certainty. Geralt, head of Xenoscience operations, stood before the deck's personnel. His voice, evenly modulated and filtered for cross-species comfort, carried the same tone one might use to announce gravitic instability or structural failure. The surface gases will rupture all cellular membranes, not protected by full-spectrum filtration. Exposure without seal integrity results in immediate loss of consciousness, followed by irreversible, systemic collapse. The latency window is estimated at 4.2 seconds. This has been confirmed across 31 species. No anomalies, no survivals. There were no questions. There were never questions after this briefing. Visual confirmation will occur from the deck. Sensor arrays are locked and calibrated. Subject unit, human engineer. Assigned identifier, Daniel Park. The name drew a pause, not among the aliens, but among the two humans present in the control ranks, both junior maintenance techs. They exchanged a look fleeting, unreadable, and went back to their terminals. Daniel Park entered without ceremony. His gait was casual, not cocky, not deferential. His helmet gleamed under the cold deck lights, and the seal locks along his collar emitted the soft hum of active redundancy. He carried no tools, no visible instrumentation, nothing but a presence that didn't quite match the clinical air of the room. Geralt turned to address him directly. "You understand the parameters." "Sure," Daniel said with a nod. "Stand here. Don't breathe anything stupid." That drew a few subtle flinches, more linguistic than emotional. Geralt regarded him in silence for a moment, as if trying to locate the precise thread of sarcasm, ironic, aggressive, or idiotic. He gave up. "Your vitals will be monitored via internal sensors. External arrays are linked to the central console. All readings will be verified visually." "Can't wait." Daniel stepped to the designated zone marked by pale yellow floor bands, and the sensor pylons locked on immediately. 4 units swiveled, each beaming harmlessly through his helmet, mapping oxygen flow, heat distribution, brain activity, chemical exhalation signatures. Numbers streamed across half the deck's panels. The watchers relaxed slightly. Human vitals. Clean, measurable, boring. Daniel Park was just a body in a suit, like any other. And that was precisely the comfort they needed. Technician Luras tapped a minor recalibration sequence. A slight drift in the ambient particle count was noted, nothing significant. The arrays compensated instantly. For those used to working with humans, the small quirks of their biology were expected and accounted for. Higher baseline metabolic waste, unpredictable hormone spikes, inconsistent hydration patterns. The system flagged them, corrected, normalized. Geralt nodded in satisfaction. Data coherence at 98.6%. Begin primary exposure cycle. The outer blast shield retracted, revealing the toxic vista in all its rust-hued violence. The wind didn't howl. It hissed. Dust lifted in thin, malevolent coils, catching the light in ways that hinted at chemical instability. Daniel's helmet turned slightly as he looked at it, but he said nothing. Then the delay started. Small, unimportant. A calibration pause. Sensor readings wobbled not wildly, just enough to draw attention. Heat flux variance dropped by half a degree. Oxygen levels briefly plateaued. Atmospheric correlation drifted off baseline. Luras frowned and keyed a manual override. "We're getting a few inconsistencies. Nothing fatal. Just noise." Geralt moved closer. "Specify. Calibration's taking longer than expected. Like the system's waiting for a signal that isn't coming." Geralt glanced at Daniel. "Subject, do you feel any physiological shift?" Daniel shrugged. just feels slow." There was a pause. Two analysts looked up at that. The sentence was harmless, the tone wasn't. "What do you mean, slow?" asked Geralt neutrally. "The gear," Daniel replied, tapping the side of his helmet. "Feels like it's lagging a little. Response time's off. Could be just me." From a human, such observations were generally ignored. Biologicals often mistook sensor delays for personal discomfort, but this statement lingered. The system didn't feel slow. Machines did not feel. And yet, "Noted," Geralt said. A touch clipped. "All systems reconfirmed. Subject, remain stationary." Daniel remained exactly where he was, but his stance shifted subtly. His weight rested slightly to one side, arms relaxed. His breathing was unchanged, visible on the internal monitors as smooth, even. No spike in cortisol, no microtremors in the hands, no preemptive stress signals. It did not match expectation. "Remind the subject that helmet removal results in immediate termination," one of the analysts said quietly, almost as if rehearsing doctrine aloud. "He is aware," Geralt answered. "Reiterate," the analyst insisted. Geralt hesitated, then turned. "Daniel Park, you are hereby reminded that removing your helmet will result in biological failure within seconds. This is not reversible. This is not theoretical." Daniel looked at him through the visor. "Understood." And then he reached up and touched the release seal. 2 clicks. Soft, definitive. Every alien eye fixed on the motion. Geralt opened his mouth, a warning forming, but Daniel was already lifting the helmet. The seal disengaged with a hiss, a rush of displaced pressure, a whisper of air that tasted like silence and old stone. Alarms screamed. Red light cascaded across the deck. Dozens of readouts flatlined at once: oxygen loss, chemical barrier collapse, immediate toxicity exposure. Vitals went dark. Biological coherence null. "Seal breach," someone shouted. Geralt surged forward. Visual, what is he doing?" Daniel stood exactly as he had before, helmet in one hand, the other resting loosely at his side. No coughing, no twitching, no collapse. The medical AI stuttered, ran a fast diagnostic loop, then spat out a clean, emotionless declaration. "Subject deceased." Then it stopped, froze. Geralt stared at the AI panel. "Repeat." No response. The system was still online, but it was no longer speaking. "We're not seeing any life signs," one analyst said slowly. "None. He's not registering at all. But he's standing right there." Daniel was watching the deck with mild curiosity. "So, are we done testing, or—" No one answered. The pylons attempted a second pass. Nothing. Biological readings scrambled. Infrared failed. Oxygen tracking failed. Neural mapping returned null, not flatline, null. As if there was nothing there to scan. "Subject, anomaly confirmed," someone whispered. Manual instruments were deployed, rolled out by trembling limbs. Geralt himself activated a spectrograph. Its readings dissolved into noise. "Try the old contact probe," Luris murmured. "The analog one." It too failed, not because it couldn't detect anything, but because the scale no longer applied. Daniel was not unreadable. He was unclassifiable. A xenobiologist, tentacles stiff with disbelief, broke the silence. "It's not that he resists detection. It's that our logic trees for life don't account for this. Human biology may be structured in a way that bypasses our entire framework." Geralt stared at Daniel. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Daniel asked. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't even smug. Just curiosity, as if he didn't expect an answer. Then he lowered the helmet back over his head and sealed it with a hiss. Instantly, the sensors came back to life. Vitals stabilized. Oxygen readings normalized. Biological patterns reappeared as if nothing had happened. The medical AI rebooted and promptly announced, "Subject stable." No one moved. Not for a long time. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "So, we good, or should I wait for a form or something?" The silence was thunderous. Across the deck, alien analysts began quietly updating their classification files. New tags, new warnings, not hostile, not immune, just unquantifiable. Geralt didn't speak for a full minute. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, "Cleared to return to duty." Daniel gave a brief nod, turned, and walked off the platform. Behind him, an analyst murmured the final line, barely audible through the shock. The sensors didn't fail. They were never designed to see humans without protection, and now they all knew it. Word of what had happened didn't spread in the usual way. There was no official dispatch, no declaration of anomaly, no attached footage sent through the Science Corps' review loop. Instead, it passed hand to hand, link to link, through late-night whispers between departments and encrypted pings that vanished after viewing. Those who hadn't seen it firsthand weren't sure they believed it. Those who had weren't sure they wanted to. But belief was secondary now. The sensor data logs were corrupted. Every scan conducted during the unhelmeted phase had been flagged as computational error. Entire arrays had overwritten their own records. The AI backup had locked its archival permissions, requiring physical override. It wasn't a mystery. It was a refusal. A decision made by technology to unsee what didn't fit. Daniel Park sat cross-legged on the floor of Engineering Junction 3, elbow deep in a failing diagnostic port, humming faintly. A bundle of optic cable strands coiled next to him like a nest of sleeping snakes. The panel above his head buzzed erratically, shorting every third sequence. He wasn't bothered. Engineer Park, came a voice behind him, stiff, formal, and unused to speaking downward. He didn't look up. It's Daniel. Commander Thresk was not accustomed to informal address. A senior systems tactician from the Jalith Consortium, he stood 2 meters tall, wore reactive armor out of habit, and believed every social encounter required strategic structure. He had not come for pleasantries. Your recent conduct on Observation Deck 1 has triggered multi-system reviews. It's a Gramlast. Daniel pulled a tiny relay chip from the housing and peered at it. That's the fancy version of, we don't know what happened, right? Thresk's facial spines twitched. Your survival violated atmospheric certainty. Our sensors confirmed your termination. You remained active. I noticed. Thresk took a measured step forward. The Science Council wants a reconstruction, controlled conditions, repeatable variables. Daniel looked up now, blinking once. You want me to take my helmet off again? Thresk didn't flinch. Correct. Daniel stood, slowly wiping his hands on the side of his utility pants. Is this an order? A formal request, sanctioned through inquiry authority. Ah, so no hazard pay then. That depends on your risk classification, which is presently under review. Daniel tilted his head, not sure how to feel about that. Commander Thresk hesitated, then added, We require answers. Your biology triggered a systemic misfire. That has implications for every integrated alliance protocol involving human deployment. You're scared, Daniel said quietly. The words hung in the air, not accusing, just accurate. Thresk said nothing, which was, in itself, an answer. Back in the main analytics chamber, the scientists had already begun the setup. A sealed cube of reinforced transparent steel sat at the center of the room, the inside scrubbed down to molecular purity. Airlocks on either side pulsed in standby. They weren't taking any chances, not with the atmosphere, not with the sensors, and definitely not with the man who had made their entire detection lattice blink like a toddler's toy. Geralt was there, of course, directing with clipped precision. Alongside him stood an entirely new contingent of personnel specialists in manual scanning, biointerpreters from the Cressari Pathogen Institute, and even a silent observer from the Tertiary Conclave, whose species had no mouths but reportedly smelled truth. Daniel entered the chamber without fanfare. His suit was regulation grade, unmodified, freshly sterilized. The helmet glinted as he stepped into the cube. Baseline scan first, Geralt instructed. Of course, Daniel said, standing motionless. The sensors flared to life again. Readings poured across screens, clean vitals, oxygen saturation, stress markers minimal, perfect data. Every system confirmed what they already knew. Daniel Park was alive, sealed, and accounted for. Geralt tapped his console. Prepare for Phase 2. Inside the cube, Daniel raised one hand. I'm gonna do this real slow. Don't scream this time. Geralt didn't reply. The hiss of the seal releasing was audible even through the thickened walls. The room held its breath. This time, they were ready. Ready for alarms, ready for sensor failure, ready for the stuttering of systems and the freeze of AI. And yet it still stunned them when it happened again. Vitals flatlined. Atmosphere sensors shrieked. Heat maps glitched into negative values. Daniel's biological profile vanished entirely, as if deleted by the act of exposure. Every automated system confirmed his death. And yet, there he stood, helmet in hand, eyes calm, breathing, living, present. The AI refused to speak. Again. One of the Crisari stepped forward with a handheld analyzer, older tech, barely smarter than a sponge. It pulsed once, tried to scan, then shut down. Not powered off, deactivated. The observer from the tertiary conclave raised a slender appendage and scribbled a symbol in the air. "What does that mean?" asked Geralt. A translator piped up. "It means this individual is not definable by known models." Geralt looked like he wanted to argue, but the readings didn't lie. Or, rather, they did, but only when Daniel removed the helmet. "What if it's the suit?" someone asked. "What if it emits a dampening field when unsealed?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Want me to strip down?" A full 3 species in the room froze in collective alarm. "Negative," Geralt said swiftly. "It's not the suit," said one of the human technicians quietly. "It's us. We've been looking at humans through a filter this whole time. We created standards based on readings through sealed environments, through armor, through barriers." The Crisari biointerpreter nodded slowly. No baseline was ever taken of an unprotected human in true exposure, not once. Every initial dataset came from protected environments. That became the model. "But that would mean," another voice said, trailing off. Geralt completed the sentence. "It would mean all our sensors, every atmospheric safety model, every medical interface, every biodetection lattice was calibrated to detect the suit, not the species inside." Daniel lowered his helmet back onto his head. As soon as the seal closed, everything snapped back into place. Vitals returned. Oxygen levels normalized. Neural patterns lit up like a star map. Alive. Visible. Real. The AI blinked twice, then calmly said, "Subject functional. No anomalies detected." The silence that followed was not confusion. It was realization. One of the analysts turned from her console. "We've never seen humans. Not really. Just projections of humans filtered through technology that interprets them as environmental risks." "It explains the immunity flags," the Crisari muttered. "The misreadings, the false positives on toxic resistance, the metabolic irregularities." Daniel looked around the room. "You all thought I was some kind of glitch." "You are," Geralt said slowly. "A glitch in our understanding." The tertiary observer scribbled another symbol in the air. This time, it translated as, "Retool your instruments, or your conclusions will always betray you." The session was closed. No further testing was requested. By the time Daniel returned to his quarters, a quiet note had been uploaded to the Human Contingents directory. It was unsigned, brief, and direct. "New classification protocol pending. Recalibration of human biosignature underway. Field use of standard sensors not recommended until update complete." At the bottom was a sentence in smaller font. "Do not remove helmets in front of unauthorized personnel." Daniel snorted at that, then closed the file. Behind him, the outpost systems continued to churn, silently rewriting the frameworks of certainty they had once held unshakable. And for the first time since its construction, the station's AI quietly amended a core assumption in its internal architecture. Humans, scan classification variable, biological definition incomplete, confidence interval unreliable. Which, in its own quiet way, was a kind of truth. Even if the sensors never meant to lie. 3 days passed without incident. On the surface, routines resumed. Atmospheric research teams went back to parsing trace elements in the upper chemical strata. Maintenance crews recalibrated compressor valves and shield emitters. The security force resumed drills. Even the medical AI returned to full operational status, albeit with a new directive to escalate all human vitals to manual verification if anomalous conditions were detected. But something fundamental had shifted. It was visible in the way analysts paused before interpreting human data, no longer trusting their own screens. It showed in the sideways glances Daniel received when walking through shared corridors. Nobody stopped him. Nobody questioned him. But every time his boots hit the deck plating, the silence shifted just slightly tighter, just slightly more curious. The outpost's official logs referred to the event only as Data Discontinuity Event 7A, unhelpful, sanitized. Yet behind closed doors, among technicians, xenobiologists, and sensor engineers, it had a different name, the Fade. A shorthand that meant when Daniel took off his helmet, the sensors saw nothing, and that nothing was worse than death. In the research wing, Geralt stood before a holographic model of the incident. He played the event in slow motion, again and again watching Daniel lift the helmet, watching the data collapse, watching the system go blind. Beside him, a new arrival stood in silence. Dr. Sava Benek, a Terran neuroscientist on loan from a joint Human Alliance initiative, had arrived on a shuttle less than a cycle ago. She had short-cut dark hair, a voice like cooled steel, and the rare human capacity to radiate stillness in rooms that weren't used to stillness. "Every time you scan him," she said, "your system fails, not because it's broken, but because it's incompatible." Geralt narrowed his eyes. "We're not detecting a null value. We're detecting nothing." "Exactly," Sava said. "You're assuming there's something to detect, some pattern your logic can parse. But your technology was never designed to interpret unmediated human biology. It was trained on sealed inputs. Never once has it seen what a human truly is." "Why would that matter?" Geralt asked. "Because the suit is a translator," she said simply. "It creates a readable format. Once you remove it, you're not just seeing the raw biological entity, you're trying to read a language your system was never taught." Geralt looked unconvinced. "Biology is not a language, it's a system. And your system," she said, "was designed without access to the alphabet we use." He turned back to the projection. "Then how is it we can interact at all?" Sava folded her arms. "Because culture taught us how to talk, not science, not sensors, just dialogue, trial and error, emotion, curiosity, all the things your machines were never calibrated to measure." Behind them, a door opened. Daniel walked in. "I'm guessing this isn't the welcome briefing," he said, looking between them. Sava smiled faintly. "Not unless you want to be dissected." "I've had worse introductions," Daniel said, stepping beside her. "Who's in charge of recalibrating the detection grid?" "We've assigned an interdisciplinary team," Geralt said, "including multiple human consultants." Daniel looked at him flatly. "Yeah, that's probably a good idea, unless you want another fade to happen during a rescue op." Geralt exhaled slowly. "We've assigned the name to a sensor tag. It's not official. But everyone's using it," Daniel replied. "You want to stop a rumor, stop giving it evidence." Sava stepped forward. "Actually, I think the term is useful, descriptive. It marks the limits of your understanding. Every species hits that point eventually. The edge of the map." "In Fangs," Geralt glanced between them. "You mean myth." "I mean the part where your models stop working," she said. "And the only way forward is to admit you don't know enough." There was a long silence. Then Geralt turned and pulled up a new schematic. "We're planning a test run outside the deep perimeter, further than any prior exposure. The atmosphere there is even more unstable, but it gives us clean conditions, no local interference, no known contaminants. If this is about the difference between the environment and your reading structures, then we should see a sharper divergence." Daniel frowned. "You're sending someone into that?" "You," Geralt said. Daniel let out a breath. "Of course." Sava touched his arm. "You don't have to agree to this." But Daniel just smiled faintly. "They need to see it. It's one thing to have your models fail in a room. It's another to watch them collapse in open terrain." Geralt inclined his head. Then it settled. The test zone was carved into the edge of a shattered valley, where ancient mineral flows formed jagged cliffs and the wind shrieked through narrow fissures. It was known as Red Channel, once considered a potential mining site, abandoned after preliminary scans showed unpredictable atmospheric chemistry. No species had tested it without full shielding. No one wanted to try. The transport skiff dropped Daniel and the sensor unit 200 meters from the ridgeline. The equipment was pre-configured to lock onto him from 10 different spectral bands. Atmospheric pods hovered nearby, adjusting for wind and chemical volatility. Daniel stood alone at the base of a rust-colored incline, watching the edge of the cliffs glow under an angry, burnt-orange sky. In the command outpost, Geralt, Sava, and a dozen specialists monitored from remote feeds. "Are you receiving clean telemetry?" Geralt asked. "Everything's good," one tech replied. "Sensors locked, baseline confirmed. Human vitals steady." Sava leaned forward. "Daniel, can you hear us?" "Loud and clear," came his voice over the comm. "Proceed at your discretion," Geralt said. Daniel stepped forward. Every movement triggered cascading data. His oxygen levels remained steady, body temperature consistent, brain activity normal. The system panned, scanned, observed, and then he paused. "Removing helmet," Daniel said calmly. The seal released. Helmet lifted, and every sensor went blind. This time, though, they expected it. "Status?" Geralt asked. "Vitals null," the tech responded. "Atmospheric readings failing. External instruments no longer recognize biological markers. Optical feeds still active." The visual remained clear. Daniel stood in a storm of toxic air, completely unprotected. Dust curled around him, clinging to his exposed skin. He exhaled slowly, breath visible for a second in the swirling air. Sava said quietly, "He should be dead." "But he's not," Geralt replied. "No," she said, "he's real. We're just not equipped to know what that means." Then something else happened. A pulse of wind surged through the valley, sharper than expected. One of the atmospheric pods dipped suddenly, losing altitude. It struck the rock face, fractured, and released a plume of experimental gas, unstable compounds designed for trace ion tracking. The feed stuttered. Inside the control station, alarms buzzed. "We lost the thermal bands," a technician shouted. Daniel turned toward the fallen pod. "Visual is degrading," Sava said. "We're getting interference." Another pulse, then static, and then without warning, Daniel vanished from every sensor. Even the visual feed cut out. "Daniel, respond," Sava called. "Do we have backup feeds?" Geralt snapped. "Nothing. He's gone." It wasn't just the fade now. It was something deeper. Daniel had disappeared. Not from the world, but from perception. A total failure of technological observation. The outpost froze. No one spoke. No one dared move. Then, slowly, audio crackled through. "I'm fine," Daniel's voice came. "Just walked behind the ridge. Interference from the gas knocked out the visual. Still here, still breathing." Geralt exhaled. "Return to the extraction point, now." 10 minutes later, Daniel climbed aboard the retrieval platform, helmet back on. Every sensor lit up. He was real again. Classified. Measurable. Understandable. Inside the control chamber, Sava looked down at the system logs. "They were never designed to see what he is," she said. Geralt didn't argue this time. Instead, he tapped a line into the reclassification report. "Human readings require direct observational correlation. Sensor-only interpretations unreliable." And underneath that, he added a personal note. "Update doctrine. We are not at the top of the map. We are at its edge." The council chambers aboard Station Virel 3 weren't meant for human physiology. The room was circular, ceiling low, with recessed floors built to accommodate aquatic and silicon-based life forms. The air was chilled and ionized, tuned to a balance that would leave most humans with nosebleeds after more than 20 minutes. But Daniel Park wasn't invited as a comfortable guest. He was here as evidence. Around him, alien delegates occupied their motion-adapted stations, some seated in nutrient shells, others hovering, others coiled. At the far end of the room, a suspended tri-panel displayed his sensor logs, with timelines showing erratic dropouts, where data should have been stable. The center feed showed the helmet removal sequence from Red Channel. It froze on the moment of full exposure. The screen displayed subject, unknown, status, unreadable. A voice spoke through layered vocal harmonics, translated midstream into a cool, precise cadence. "Mr. Park, you are here to verify the chain of events recorded on Observation Deck 1 and during the Red Channel test exposure. Do you affirm these events occurred as described?" Daniel, standing alone in the hollow center of the chamber, gave a half shrug. "Yeah, that's me. That's what happened. Do you acknowledge that current sensor systems failed to detect your vital functions after helmet removal?" He tilted his head slightly. "Failed to detect. Yeah, but not because I wasn't alive. Just because your tech doesn't know what to do with me when the training wheels come off." A ripple passed through the chamber. Subsonic, unreadable, but unmistakable. Discomfort. The kind that doesn't come from disbelief, but from belief that carries consequences. Another voice spoke, clipped and higher pitched. "You are suggesting that every biosensor used across 54 planetary systems is functionally invalid when exposed to unprotected humans?" "No," Daniel said, calm. I'm suggesting your sensors never learned how to see us without our helmets on. So all your calibration models, they're built on filtered inputs, not humans, just reflections. Silence again, not hostile, calculating. Behind him, the tri-panel feed changed to a new display, a recorded internal memo. It showed the quote Geralt had entered into the reclassification report. Update doctrine. We are not at the top of the map, we are at its edge. One of the seated beings leaned forward, mechanical limbs clicking softly as it gestured. Then you are not an anomaly, it said. You are the beginning of a failed framework's exposure. Daniel blinked. That's supposed to be a compliment? Sava Benek, standing near the rear of the chamber in a support delegation role, finally spoke. The problem isn't Daniel, it's that every species that built these detection systems made the same error. You assumed protection meant weakness, so you scanned what was safe to scan and built everything on that. The suit wasn't just keeping humans alive, it was giving you the illusion of understanding. A translucent being, one of the Siloan, rippled with shifting color. Its tone was formal. Then what are humans, outside the suit? The question wasn't poetic, it was literal. Sava looked at Daniel. He didn't respond immediately. Then he stepped forward into the center ring, removing his helmet one last time. The chamber's environmental systems detected the shift immediately. Air composition flagged. Contaminant levels spiked, only the human's internal systems didn't register any distress. Sensors around the room began their dance again, scanning, correcting, failing. All biological readouts zeroed. Daniel stood there, eyes open, breath steady, completely absent from every system meant to track him. A machine voice declared, "Subject no longer detectable. Recommend containment." Daniel turned toward the nearest camera lens and said, "I'm standing still. I'm not hostile. I'm not dying. I'm just here. And your tools don't know how to read that. Doesn't mean I'm dangerous. Doesn't mean I'm immune. It just means your definitions are smaller than the thing you're trying to measure." Sava stepped beside him. "What we're asking for isn't panic. It's reevaluation. Update your assumptions. Humans aren't outside science. But your version of science doesn't include all the variables." A long pause followed. Then, the Siloan delegate responded. "We have relied on a false consistency. The human being is no longer simply unpredictable. It is undefined." Another voice joined, one of the Thylix diplomats. "Perhaps always was. We only believed otherwise because the helmet gave us something to read." At the back of the chamber, a member of the Inari thought caste, known for their logic-driven science doctrines, raised a curved appendage. Then this becomes a doctrinal issue, not of biology, of perception. If we admit our tools were flawed, we must admit our interpretations were flawed, and that opens questions far beyond the human. No one responded, but the silence that followed wasn't resistance. It was adjustment. Daniel resealed his helmet. The sensors blinked back on. Vitals appeared. Heart rate, normal. Oxygen saturation, stable. Neural bands, active. All the metrics lit green. It was like magic, except it wasn't. It was simply old instruments returning to a framework they understood. The suit was a key, not to his survival, but to the illusion of comprehension. The session closed shortly after. No declarations were made. No new doctrines were written that day. But within 6 hours of the chamber dispersing, every known alliance system pushed an internal update across their databases. New human classifications were added. Not based on strength, not based on immunity, but on perceptual variability. A new flag was attached to every human biomarker profile. Interpret with caution. Direct sensor readings may not reflect actual status. And deeper inside the system, a hidden tag was added to the core AI logic trees. Humans. Measurement incomplete species. Recalibration required. That night, back in the outpost's engineering level, Daniel leaned over a diagnostic panel. The atmospheric regulator had been humming off-key for hours. Nothing urgent, but enough to bother him. Sava entered quietly, hands in the pockets of her lab coat. "So," she said, "you're officially undefined now." He grinned. "About time someone admitted it." She leaned on the panel beside him. "They'll study this for years. Your exposure test, the sensor collapses, the red channel logs. It'll all go into training modules." Daniel made a face. "I hate being a module." "You're not a module. You're the footnote that rewrites the page." A soft beep interrupted them. The regulator's internal scan completed, displaying a minor pressure fault. Nothing serious. He knelt down to patch it. "You think they'll ever stop being scared?" he asked. "They're not scared of you," Sava said. "They're scared of everything they built to make the universe manageable. And now, they know the scaffolding's cracked." Daniel finished the patch and stood. "Good." She raised an eyebrow. "Good?" He nodded. "If they're scared, they'll be careful. Careful means better questions. Better questions mean fewer dead assumptions." Outside, the atmosphere howled across the distant cliffs of Red Channel. A storm front was rolling in, volatile, beautiful, full of the kind of chaos you couldn't chart in advance. Inside, the station held steady. A new report uploaded silently into the Outpost Doctrine system. It carried a single recommendation: cease relying on sensor logic as sole confirmation of life status. At the end of the file, a footnote had been added by someone without clearance, traced back to an anonymous login. Sometimes the instruments aren't broken. Sometimes you're just not ready to see what's really there. Daniel turned off the panel lights. The hum normalized. And across 100 systems, as sensor grids were patched, updated, and recoded, a quiet truth settled into the heart of galactic science.